podcast from Drew and Mike is, I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. I'll keep the intro short because this episode was really pushing the 1 hour boundary and actually breaks through it, so I apologize for that. Anyway, Chris and I jump into topics that include Chris's catering business in Berlin, Christmas, Pele, NFL injuries, the US unjustice system, and the farce of choosing a Republican speaker in 15 or so short steps. Anyway, thanks Chris again for your time and enjoy. Chris, it's good to have you back. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to start this new sort of series concept where we're going to call it The Story from the Other Side. So basically these are like issues or tales or news items from the other side of the Atlantic. But at the same time, we'll sort of check in with how you're doing, like an American in Berlin. And what's going on. So as we've just come through the festive period, you were quite busy, I think.
Yeah, I was pretty busy. Like not too busy, maybe 3 or 4 days through the holidays, but I wanted to make some money. It's a good time of year, and it was good, but not too crazy. It was just good to work and get some satisfaction in making some food for some people and some caterings, and they were happy, and I think that's part of my job and what I do for a living. So
yeah, and you got some really good feedback from people. They were like, "Hey, do you do this during the year too?" and stuff. So I mean, that must be really sort of rewarding for you to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, as I'm trying to transition the business into more of like catering and cooking and kind of build up the products that we can produce. So that's what I am slowly trying to introduce to my clientele and customers. So I think it was a good start. So now it's just kind of moving forward and keep doing and pushing it and trying to get more different avenues of revenue is the goal right now.
Okay, all right. And are you going to sort of focus a little bit on publicity, or is it like word of mouth? And
No, I've been trying to. So I paid a friend who's like a social media manager to kind of update my social media, to have the same color themes. And I actually want to start doing more cooking tutorials or just like recipes, not like super tutorial, but just like kind of TikToks, quick videos, kind of highlighting like Southern American cooking and these classic recipes and maybe some of the history behind them. I was back with my cousins in Atlanta, and I kind of asked a couple of them, like, what are the classic Southern dishes? I mean, I grew up in the South a bit, but DC and Maryland, it's right on the borderline. So we do get most of that, good cuisine in the South and that style. But we have a little bit more like East Coast, like Northwest, Northeast, I'm sorry, with the Chesapeake Bay, a lot of seafood and fish and crabs. So the cuisine I grew up is more that way. But the South, you have a little bit more fried chicken and collard greens and pork chops, smothered pork chops and potato salad and all this stuff. So it's good it's interesting actually to see like how much has changed, and a lot of it has to do with the Great Migration after slavery and civil rights and Jim Crow, and when the black people kind of exited the South and Jim Crow laws and slavery, moved to the northern cities. They brought some of these cuisines and techniques of cooking, but then they were using different products, but was based locally in those areas of Chicago and New York and DC, Philadelphia, and the inspiration they had around those parts, with other immigrants and stuff that you didn't really have in the deep South.
Mm. Yeah. When I lived in Italy, in Parma, I was kind of told about the sort of history of some of their wonderful recipes that they have, whether that is capelletti or some of the other kinds of pasta dishes. And essentially it was a very similar story. You'd have the sort of servants or the poor people in the area had to be really creative with the kind of food that they could cook, because obviously they wanted to eat food which tasted nice. But they couldn't afford all of these steaks and chicken and other kinds of meat dishes, so they had to get really creative with vegetables, with sauces, with the pasta, and that's how a lot of these things were essentially created. Taking a bit from this and a bit from that and a bit from that, and these are now wonderful dishes which you can eat, and which are quite expensive now, but originally that wasn't the case. Now, I remember you sent me a story about a New York kind of sandwich or a burger, which was supposed to be like a $5 burger in the original restaurant or diner that it was created. But you could walk around the corner where a slightly more fashionable business has basically put the price up to $15 for a sort of copy of that. So it's really interesting how over time, what was once considered a dish for poor people has sort of been taken over and upgraded, and made for profit for a slightly more swanky clientele.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially if you compare. I mean, I guess in any culture you can see from the wealthier to the less fortunate, their cuisine was different, but especially in the U.S. where you had like slavery and the African American community only had, could only afford or only given, certain products, and they were able to use different techniques to make it taste good, and that's actually, super talent. Around the world, you see where people are using vegetables, especially that are inexpensive, and making them taste good or not so pleasant parts of the animal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where creativity is. It's unfair to say perhaps forced upon you, because creativity has to exist in the first place for it to be able to come out. But when people are kind of challenged to be more creative, then they create those opportunities for themselves in which they can be, and the results are very clear throughout history. We're being pushed in many societies nowadays to also be more creative, whether that's through sort of saving energy, whether that's through keeping warm, or finding other kinds of solutions in these days. Hopefully we shouldn't have to be creative to satisfy certain needs, but that's the way of our Western societies at the moment. Cool. Okay. So we'll keep an eye out. Maybe I can also add some of your social media channels in the podcast description later on. So I'll make sure I've got all of that. I don't have your TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, so that's probably why. But if you've got a TikTok channel as well.
I opened one, but I haven't really started with my stuff yet. But
okay, all right. So we can wait on the TikTok, but your other sort of social media presence we can highlight. All right. Anything else you want to say on your festive season production?
No. I mean, it's very interesting, Berlin. I spent a couple of years here now around Christmas, and it's unbelievable how empty the city gets. For being a capital city and in the country, like one of the most populous countries in Europe, to be so empty. It just really shows you how many people are like, transient and not from here. But it's just because think about New York and other big cities. People go to these cities for holidays to celebrate. It seems like everybody leaves Berlin on the holidays.
Yeah, I mean, do you mean specifically New Year's?
No, like Christmas. I mean, just the time between Christmas and
okay.
Christmas Eve and Christmas, it's like everything's closed. Restaurants, bars, they all close from the 22nd to the 4th and 3rd, and like in the U.S., like this never would happen. Like people would close like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and they might close like New Year's Day, or most of the time, like it's never seen it like this. I guess it's maybe people take the holidays more serious and that's time off, or I think it's a lot of it has to do with it's just not economically smart to stay open, because there's so many people aren't from Berlin and they go home to their other cities and countries around Germany and the world. So it's just very interesting. I guess it's just so many, and also maybe there's the population of people who don't celebrate Christmas as well.
Well, they would theoretically more likely be out and about and enjoying themselves. I find that the shops which continue to operate until sort of half day on Christmas Eve, obviously they're the ones which know that people are going to pop in. So these would be like butchers, supermarkets, maybe some quite popular toy shops and so on. But otherwise, people know that if it's not food related, essentially nobody's going to come in. And on the 24th, 25th, and 26th, there are also sort of 3 days of family get-togethers, mainly in at least in Berlin, from the families that I'm aware of. This is essentially what they try to do. Actually, it's very interesting because I was kind of told by a friend that Christmas advertising is really one-dimensional. It's very much your sort of, your happy couple, your kids, the families all coming together. But there's very little variation to the advertising. So as in, there are lots of people who don't perhaps celebrate Christmas. There are lots of people who don't perhaps have families. There are lots of people who are nowadays single, or they just live in a sort of shared accommodation with other people. And the traditional marketing campaigns and advertising campaigns don't look at these other sort of social mixes. And that was quite an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's based off of this, historically off this religious holiday based, with family and celebrating, and for the marketers, that's the best way to make money, to sell to sell this dream, this idea of Christmas, and being together and eating dinner and buying presents and celebrating, and how many people are actually in this ideal situation. You know what I mean? I would like to see the numbers on that.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, and also to see why it's become such a large commercial thing as well, considering there is still such an emphasis on the religious significance of Christmas. But that doesn't mean that in any way it is less commercial than in other countries. It's very commercialized in Germany too. And in fact, from September on, you can start seeing, Christmas products in the shops. It's crazy.
I mean, I've actually, now, if I think about it, I've spent Christmas in probably 4 different countries, maybe. I've spent Christmas in the U.S., Germany, Vietnam, and Sweden.
Okay, and obviously, your experiences of the U.S. are going to be sort of a lot more dominant than your other experiences, but were they significantly different?
Well, the U.S. is just mayhem when it comes to the whole shopping thing, the presents and the traffic you see outside malls. I know where I grew up, the mall would have a line just to get to the parking lot to park. You know what I mean? And that would take you 30 or 40 minutes, and you would know, like, don't go by the mall to the next couple of days because it's just too crazy. And I mean, this is even on like the 22nd, 23rd, maybe even even before, like say like the 21st or the 22nd on a Saturday or Sunday. I mean, it's gonna be crazy,
But this is before like these huge online retailers, or are you talking about even in recent years?
No, I mean people are. I mean, recent year. I mean, last 10 years, I guess.
Okay.
I think people are ordering a lot more online, Like I know some of my family in the U.S. is doing a lot of ordering on like Black Friday because of the deals, and they can just order everything. And if you have like 5 or 6 people you need to get presents for, you can buy a bunch of different stuff, shoes and stuff on sale, and it comes straight to your house in a couple of days, and you're ready to go. But if I look at like Germany, yeah, I saw people out shopping. I think the people who have a little bit more fun, extra funds, are definitely shopping more. But I think it's more about getting together with family and having dinner. This type of thing is very important as well here. But I wouldn't say it's that far away from the U.S. With like the kind of buying stuff and people going out. I think the markets are very lovely here. That's the nicest part about it.
The
And
Christmas markets, yeah.
yeah, and Vietnam, it was like 2 or 3 years ago I was there. I don't remember much. You know what I mean? I don't think it wasn't as westernized, as it is, in the other 2 places. And then in Sweden, um, it's all about the dinner, and I don't even think my friend, like, they even bought gifts. you know,
Mm.
I think they had dinner and drinks, and they had a couple. They watched like some like famous cartoon at night. Everybody watches. I forget what it is. The cartoon, and then they have dinner, and everybody has the same type of dinner, and then people go out on the 25th and get drunk. But it was very like traditional and nice. But in the U.S., like you can't even get into some people's houses. They have so many gifts.
Yeah, I mean, the
It's
commercialization is crazy, isn't it?
I mean, some parents. Dude, some parents are spending like a couple $1,000s on the kids. Just one kid buying a new laptop, buying new iPads. Buying. Some people buy kids cars. Like it's crazy. Like if you didn't come back to school on that following Monday after the first and didn't have a new Xbox or a new iPad, then like you felt left out. You didn't feel cool enough. So like most parents do it so their kid doesn't attack them and get sad and freak out.
Yeah, I follow a lot of different either psychology or medical channels and professionals on Twitter, and there were quite a few teachers too, for obvious reasons. And they said, when the kids come back in the new year, whatever you do, you don't ask them questions about what did you do over the holidays? Did you go on holiday? Did you receive this present or that? Because you don't necessarily know whether or not the kid celebrates Christmas. But on the other hand, for the exact reasons that you said, there are some families who simply cannot compete. They simply don't have the money to be able to put either the kind of food on the table, which everybody says, oh, I had a great turkey dinner, or I had this. These dinners cost a lot of money. And so we can't expect, especially in this kind of period of time where there is energy crisis, there's a cost of living crisis, that people can simply cater for these kinds of special occasions with the amount of money that they have. And so teachers that have been sort of directed away from talking too much about these festive periods for that reason. I mean, it shouldn't have to be about what you got or where you went, should it? Really?
No, it shouldn't at all. I used to see it when I coached basketball, and I coached basketball at the school that I think the tuition was like 25,000 a year from Kita up to senior in high school, and very nice school, very very liberal school. Like they called the teachers by their first names, and they didn't have uniforms, but it was a private school. And you would see that they would give scholarships to kids who were less fortunate, mostly black kids, some Hispanic kids, who would apply for scholarships, and they would let them come because they want to have a kind of a mix in their, in their school, whatever their community. And so you see these kids come back after break, and we would coach basketballs in the winter, so we come back, and then some kids would have like new pair of shoes, new iPods, AirPods, and then you would see the kid that kind of has the single mom who works 2 jobs, and they still have the same stuff, or their mom would spend all the money she has to make sure that the kid got new basketball shoes and iPods, AirPods, and she's going to be broke for the next 2 months paying off credit card bills just so her kid can feel part of like this community. You know what I mean? Of like, because they're all showing it off. You know, from even when we were like 9 years old, 8 years old. Look what I got. Look what I got. You know what I mean? I don't miss that part, and sadly I stopped really buying that many gifts. I didn't think I bought any gifts this year. Because I don't like this whole thing. It's being disappointed. I mean, I remember I used to get disappointed with my mom or my dad because I didn't get something I wanted, instead of just being happy that we were going to have breakfast and be together. And now I don't have my parents, and I wish I would do anything to have Christmas again. When I think about when I was younger and I was, mad because I didn't get the pair of shoes I wanted or a laptop or an Xbox, and it's just like, you lose sight of the whole big picture.
Yeah, I mean, this is, though, you can't blame the kids, can you, for this? This is the kind of world which the adults have created. Yeah, exactly. And I keep on seeing. I look at these people and I say, okay, fair enough. If you've got money, then obviously you want to be able to treat your kids. You want to be able to look after them. I mean, that's kind of like some of the developmental, the natural developmental approach that people have, and that's fair enough, of course. But it shouldn't be done in a way where you come to school and it's kind of thrown into the faces of less fortunate kids saying, yeah, look, I got this, what do you have? Because that sense of entitlement that the richer kids have, it can lead to complications later on in life for their, in some ways, a lack of perception, lack of ability to empathize, and on the other hand, other kids are basically told you're not good enough, and they always have to struggle with their inner demons to be able to overcome any kind of disadvantages that they face in society anyway, and that just makes it doubly difficult for them to achieve.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, all right. Hopefully, at some point, society will manage to reboot itself, but I won't hold my breath on that, considering how things are. But anyway, we're supposed to be talking about other issues on the other side of the Atlantic. So, this week we saw a great put to rest, and obviously by this I'm referring to Pele. For me, the greatest ever footballer, as in for you would say soccer player, but I can't allow myself to use that term. So for me, the greatest ever football player, there's no, as in head and shoulders above anybody else who is put forward for this particular title. Where do you see Pele in your pantheon?
I think he is the greatest player of all time. I mean, no other player has won 3 World Cups. His playing career spanned over 20 years. He played 56 to 77. I think he globalized the game, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, it was huge. I mean, I don't think it would. Do you think it would be as big if it wasn't for Pele and bringing it to South America and the U.S. and because Shirley, Pele went to her son's school in the 70s or early 80s. Andrew Young, who was like one of King's right hand man, he was also the mayor of Atlanta and also the UN ambassador to the U.S. He got Pele to come to Atlanta. And she posted pictures of my cousin Cabral and all his friends at school with Pele.
Wow.
So, like this guy was, I mean, also being the best player, but also just doing, just way he spread the game. And I think I'm looking at his, he beat Sweden, Chile, and Mexico, which if you look at it now, those aren't the 3 best footballing nations in the world, but I think I don't know what was going on with everybody else at this point. But ever since I was a kid, it was Pele, 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 you know? And I think that's all Americans knew. But he played in New York, right? The Cosmos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was big. And because that's when in the 80s is when kids started to play soccer. And it's funny because even now I think it's the first sport every American plays.
Really?
Yeah, it's not the most popular sport, but it's the first sport that we all play at age. I remember my mom coached my team with my buddy Pete, who I still am friends with, and his mom and my mom were the coach of our team. It was co-ed, and we were 4 years old. Because I guess like basketball, you're too small to play. American football is too physical at that point. And I mean, what else can you play? What's else is simple enough just to run around and kick a ball around and at this goal and that goal, you know?
Mm.
And we would all run around in these big herds. Everybody's around the ball.
Yeah, that's always great to see with kids football. There's no notion of positioning. There's
there's a big beehive following the ball around the field.
Yeah.
And I remember at 4 years old playing, and my brother played, and my brother was 8 years older than me, so he was like 12, 13, and he was pretty good actually. He grew up because we had grown up like right in DC, and there was a big African and Latino community. So he was playing against Hispanic players, African players who were very skilled, who their family loves. They've been playing their whole lives. You know what I mean? So it was part of their family. Their dads would play, their cousins, whatever. So they were playing as young kids, and they had skills, and he was put into this group and was playing with these highly skilled players. And then when my parents got divorced, my mom moved to Maryland, which was more suburbia, white suburbia actually. And we were going to private schools, and my brother was like one of the only black kids, and he's playing these private school leagues, and he was dominating, because he had played at a higher level, at a faster pace level, more physical level, in DC, and like in the streets or in the park, and then in these leagues that had kids from all over. Parents were like, kids were speaking, Spanish, and I remember going as a kid and being like, wow. And then when we moved out, and I remember he was the leading scorer in our county in his senior year. And my dad was an all-county player as well back in 68, 69, 70. And my dad's school, he was the first class to go to integrated school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this was, my dad was 72, I think, my class, or 71. So my dad went to high school in the 68, and that was the first year, I guess had integrated. So, yeah, and he was an all-county soccer player, played lacrosse, and then he went to Howard University and studied zoology. But yeah, and it's funny because a girl I went to high school with, I don't know what happened. I said something. She said something to her dad about me or something, and said my last name. I'm going to hang out with Haskins or something, and he was like, Haskins, it's his dad, Jeff Haskins, and she came and asked me, and I was like, yeah, and I asked my dad. He goes, oh man, I think they're like Steve Carr or something. He's like, oh man, that was my buddy back in high school, blah blah blah, and her dad said the same thing. He's like, oh man, yeah, we were buds back in high school, blah blah blah. And then I'm going to high school with her. With his daughter, so it was pretty cool. But yeah, let's not get off topic. But yeah. So I think Pele also spread the game internationally from these things, and I need to read more about him. You just hear I've watched some videos. He's very talented, and I heard they're gonna put his feet into a museum. I don't know if that's real. That might have been fake news.
Oh God. Okay. I'm not sure I'd want to see that, but
the picture of them, and they just look tattered.
Mm-hmm. God.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, like I kind of said earlier on, for me, he was the ultimate.
Hold on, look at this stat. He's played 700 games, and guess how many goals he has?
No, 1 minute. That's a different stat to what I've seen, because I saw that he played 1,300 games, including everything, and
All
he
right,
scored.
this is including. All right, well, this is including Brazil, but this is saying from Santos and Cosmos, he played
Okay.
7.
All right, yeah. So there's a lot more than that, because I think he played also for some other teams which were perhaps not necessarily recorded professionally, but across all of the games that he played, I think which were about 1,300, he scored almost 1,200 goals.
Yeah, it says like 60. It says 700 games, 655 goals. So he pretty much scored every game he played.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As in, it's a ridiculous talent. And see, the thing is, nowadays people look at Messi and Ronaldo and say these guys are the best of all time. But I mean, okay, Messi and Ronaldo are perhaps the best of their generation, but how much better than the rest of their generation are they? And I would imagine that the percentages are, okay, this is very, very subjective, but the percentages are perhaps not that great. Whereas if you look at Pele, and how much better he was than his generation, I think there is a huge difference. And what that says to me was that Pele had a freakish talent. His superiority and his of talent within the game was so great that if he had been playing in the modern day with modern scientific knowledge, with the training methodologies, yeah, he would be just an absolute beast of a player. He'd probably be scoring 2 goals a game. No one would be able to stop him. And I know this is that.
Do you actually agree with that? I mean, because they bring this up a lot with like Jordan, LeBron, and Magic and Bird, that the guys who were playing, and you watch the videos. I've watched some of these older games. The guys just aren't as strong as athletic. They don't have the technology that they are given now, and the type of workouts and blah blah blah. Do you think? I mean, obviously the players weren't as talented as they are now when he was playing, but are you saying that his talent was so good that he would be even more talented with the?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we also have to look at the kinds of the characters behind the players. Yeah. For example, Michael Jordan. When you watch, The Last Dance, the documentary, when he first goes into that Chicago Bulls team, these guys, when they're on the road, they're gambling, okay, which he liked to gamble too, but they're drinking, they're taking drugs, and he's like, no, no, yeah. If you're the kind of person who's going to abuse your body by drinking and taking drugs, then you're not going to stay at the top for a significant period of time. At some point, that starts to take its toll. This is one of the reasons why I stopped smoking 3.5 years ago. As it is, it's hard for me to play against people 10 years, 15 years younger than me. But if I'm smoking at the same time, after 10 minutes, I'm heaving. And so I had to stop that completely to be able to, in some way, keep running, let alone actually competing with the guys. And I think that there are, if you are an elite athlete and you have a certain kind of talent, a certain kind of ability, you've got to respect your body and give it an opportunity of competing for a sustained period of time. Michael Jordan did that. And I think clearly Pele was able to do that. And the only reason was because he understood, to be able to do what I do, I need to look after my body. And I think a lot of players of his generation, they wouldn't do that. I mean, I remember I know I didn't play, but I worked at a sports shop in Shepherd's Bush in London. And I was told by the manager there that, in the 80s, the professional players from QPR, because Loftus Road was just around the back of where I worked, the professional players used to go to the pub in the morning and have a couple of beers with the fans. And then about 2 hours before kickoff, they'd say, sorry, guys, we've got to go to the stadium and change and do our warm-up. And that's the kind of culture that there existed in professional football in the UK at the time. And this is, 20 years after Pele, if not more. And you think, did Pele do that? Was he, sort of an alcoholic? I'm not sure he could have played at that level. if he had been.
Yeah, I mean, you can look back at their picture. Some guys used to smoke at halftime.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, coaches having a cigarette on the sidelines while they're watching the game.
Yeah, like Red Auerbach, he used to smoke a cigar during the game. The Celtics. They used to smoke in the gym, so there'd be a lot of smoke in the top of the arena.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we,
Playing professional basketball in a gym that they're smoking cigars.
oh man, that's horrible. I mean, but as I even mentioned, Jordan. I mean, we've seen Jordan in some of his interviews, and he's got this huge cigar in his mouth. So he smoked at least cigars, even while he was a player. But just to say that, okay, you can't put them all in the same kind of category. But yeah, no, for me, where if I'm running and my lung capacity is therefore expanded from the effort. If you walk past somebody who's smoking and you breathe it in, it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Pele there'll never be another Pele. Especially the humanitarian aspect of it. And also the player, to win 3 World Cups is tremendous.
Yeah.
Look how hard it is just for one player to a player like Messi just to win one.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm not going to suggest that he had a helping hand, but let's just say that destiny kind of created a possibility where he was able to go on and do things.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you think about it, I mean, a lot of people are saying this. I don't think the teams laid down for him, but yeah, maybe some of the refereeing and some of the things. But I think also for FIFA, it was the only thing they could do to cover up, the World Cup, really, to make it like people forget all the other stuff around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and this is why I don't want to stress my opinion on this too much, because I didn't watch the games, so therefore I can't claim to have seen any of these bad decisions or any of these penalties, which were clearly not penalties.
Yeah, they gave 6 or something.
Yeah, maybe there was a record set for the number of penalties that they were given. I don't know. I'm only going by what the journalists reported in some of the games and some of the headlines, where people were just saying that's blatantly not a penalty. And yet, what's VAR for if it's going to let these sort of incorrect decisions stand? But anyway,
but also at the end of the game, there was plays made, there were saves made, he scored. They still scored when it counted. After. But did you read this story about the U.S. men's soccer team that's going on now?
No.
So who Claudio Reyna is?
Yeah.
So he was a U.S. player, and the coach also played the U.S. national team, Berghalter, and he also coached a team in Sweden, Hammarby, which is the first division team in Sweden. But so him and Reyna play together. His son, Gio Reyna, plays for Dortmund, and he's 19 or 20. He plays well. He's a star. And so during the World Cup, he wasn't playing. And everybody was like, why is he not playing? Why is he not playing? They need him. He's a forward, a striker. They need, to score, attacking player. And everybody's wondering why he's not playing. And then everybody's like, Reyna and the coach, they played together for the national team. He should be pushing to have this guy. And then it comes out that during training, he didn't train hard. He had an attitude, blah, blah, blah. And the coach decided not to play him. And then Claudio and his wife, his wife contacted the U.S. national team during the World Cup to say that she had dirt on the coach, that 31 years ago he had kicked his girlfriend in college, who is now his wife, and they have 4 kids.
This headline I read. Yes, okay.
It's just coming out now, and the coach got fired. So then he came out and said that they blackmailed me after he got released. He said that they blackmailed me, that the Reynas, both of them, even the dad, also contacted them and said that they have information on him, and why isn't their son playing? It's like the ultimate soccer mom situation. Like, this is kind of stuff that happens in like high schools and middle schools in the U.S. And it's unbelievable that they would, like, especially a 20-year-old kid he's like one of the best talents the U.S. has, and because he didn't play, that the parents want to totally sabotage his career and the U.S. national team.
Yeah, I can't comment. I mean, I read the headline about the coach kicking his wife at some point, and I don't know why I didn't continue reading the article, but I hate all kinds of violence, especially those against women, and I didn't really want to read any more abusive information, and so I stayed away from it. But those circumstances seem to be quite, I would say, unique in international football. Though we have had a few players who have followed the advice of either their mums or their dads, quite famously as well. So
I was actually reading about Rabiot.
Yeah, the French guy.
No, the French guy. Yeah, that his mom is the same way. Like, she's his agent, and she had an issue with Manchester United because they wanted to sign him, but she wanted a certain amount of money and playing time, and then because then PSG, when PSG Tuchel found out that his mother was talking to United, then Tuchel stopped playing him altogether. And then it's so funny, man.
Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of that. He had a problem with Didier Deschamps in the previous World Cup in 2018 when they won it in Russia. He wanted apparently some kind of guarantee that he would start, and Deschamps was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. Look at the quality of players I've got. I've got Pogba. I've got Kante. I can't just guarantee that." And so therefore he said, "Well, I'm not going to come then in that case." So I've heard he's a very good player, of course, but there is a sense of entitlement about him, which it doesn't work well in a team sport scenario, does it?
No, but I mean, depends how good you are, I guess, also. Because if LeBron James 10 years ago says, I better get this and that, teams are going to do it.
Yeah, but basketball, again, is a little bit different as a sport. I wouldn't want to necessarily compare. I mean, an individual player represents 20% of the team in basketball, whereas in football, it's slightly less because there are so many more players. I agree.
What's the next topic?
Are you accelerating us on? Do you have
we can go on and on about.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Don't worry, I'll do some good editing later on. All right, so we both agree that Pele, therefore, was the man, and there's no argument. I'm not going to talk about any of the others. All right, but moving on from one sports person to another. So this week, or was it last week, Damar Hamlin collapsed in an American football game. What's the story there?
So supposedly he plays safety, so he plays defense, and I'm pretty sure he plays defense. And the guy caught the ball and then put his shoulder into his chest, and it caused him to have cardiac arrest. So his heart stopped beating.
Okay, so this isn't exactly what happened to Christian Eriksen. This was because Eriksen, nobody touched Eriksen, he collapsed, but what you're saying is this guy, his heart was hit with
kind of like hit. I mean, I've seen this happen when I was in high school. Like, lacrosse player got hit. You know what lacrosse is, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Got hit in the chest with a shot that's traveling like about 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And it hit him when his heart was like beating, like an off beat or something. So it threw the heartbeat off, and it caused him to go into like a cardiac arrest. And then luckily they had like the shock things at the field, and they shocked him back to life.
Okay.
So this dude, he actually died on the field, and then they brought him back to life, shocked his heart back to beating, and then
Hamlin, you mean?
Hamlin, yeah, and then he's in critical condition right now, but they said he's improving.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully that continues. I mean, Christian Eriksen apparently was also dead for a few minutes, and then they resuscitated him. And yeah, as you know, 4 years later, he's playing professional football in the Premier League. So,
And the World Cup.
yeah. Well, I mean, he returned at the beginning of last season because Inter, his team at the time when he had his heart attack, in Italy, if you have a questionable heart condition, you're not allowed to play. So I remember when I played in Italy, even amateur football, you can only play 30 minutes if it's an adults league because they feel that if you play a 45-minute half, there's more chance of people suffering from heart attacks because people play football well into their 40s and 50s. And so when I first turned up in Italy, the referee blew the whistle after half an hour when I was like 31, and I'm thinking, 1 minute, what's going on here? I was told that they only have 30-minute halves because they're worried about heart attacks. So Italy is very strict with regards to this particular health policy that they have. So Christian Eriksen was not allowed to play in Serie A, and then he was welcomed back at the beginning of last season to play for Brentford. He had a great season. And then at the beginning of this season, he signed for United. So, yeah, I guess he was available for the World Cup.
Yeah, he played for Denmark.
Yep. Very good player, very good team. Okay, hopefully then, Damar Hamlin will make a similar recovery. But do they have? I know that the American football has been heavily criticized in the past for its lack of, how should I say, healthcare. Is perhaps the best way to look at it. So lots of head injuries to players, lots of other kinds of muscular injuries, and also the way the players after retiring suffer from significant traumas, head traumas, and so on. Is the NFL becoming stricter with regards to its healthcare of the players?
Yeah, I think so. There's only so much you can really do with the NFL, and they've changed the rules every year to kind of stop this type of injuries, but it's always going to be a full contact sport, and they're traveling at a high rate of speed and big collisions. I think the biggest issue they have is like the CTS or whatever, CTE, is caused by people being hit in the head for years. That's the big problem.
Yeah, but also landing on their heads when they do these crazy leaps for touchdowns, and you go for the knee, and then obviously the people land on their heads and their shoulders and their backs when they sort of flip over. So in general, it's just a really aggressive sport, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And the amount of people the amount of ACLs, it's really weird because I was talking to somebody about it. Like you look at soccer, they're always cutting on their legs, on their feet, and you don't hear so many ACL injuries. But like in football, it's like one ACL injury per game.
Yeah. This is the knee, right? We're talking about.
Yeah, it's like the ligament that connects the knee. It's like it's happening all the time.
Yeah. I don't know why there are some injuries which are quite common to specific sports, but even though when there are other sports when there are sort of similar levels of application, I don't know. Is it because American football players, generally speaking, are a bit bulkier up top, and their knees have a lot more pressure. They've got a lot more weight to carry. Then they also have to wear a lot more gear, as in helmets and all the padding and stuff. It adds extra weight, doesn't it?
Yeah, and they don't play on so much real grass anymore. They play more on AstroTurf, or this kind of turf that kind of it's not probably as responsive, and they're a lot bigger too.
Yes. So more weight to carry, essentially, puts more pressure on them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, all the best to Damar Hamlin then. Earlier today, you sent me an interesting article from, I think it was the Washington Post, talking about some statistics with regards to prison population. Yeah, do you want to go through what some of these statistics are saying?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you have the article?
I do indeed. Give me a moment. I shall fire it up. So basically, what the article says at the beginning is that 1 in 7 U.S. prisoners is serving life, and 2/3 of those are people of color.
I do a lot of like reading about like prison and crime, and like, I studied criminal justice in college and stuff. I've always had like an interest in true crime and how do people get to this point, of spending their life in prison for taking someone else's life, and it's just interesting how mentally you get to this point, right?
Yeah.
But I would go from using like strain theory, this terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and especially in the U.S., in the Black community, with, the whole, we can go on for days about different things, but like in neighborhoods and education and, lack of resources that people are, have to choose other ways, other means to put food on the table, to make money and get by, that being involved in that type of
Criminality.
activity, really, ends up putting more of these people in jail. But just think about like 200,000 people are serving life sentences.
Yeah, and which is more than the entire prison population in 1970. But also of those people who are serving life, 30% are at least 55 years old. So, I mean, I don't know at what age these people, generally speaking, committed their crimes. But if you, I suppose, take some kind of an average and say, well, these people have been there for at least, I don't know, 20 odd years, then you're talking about a criminal justice system which exhibited inequality in the way that they prosecuted people of color over others, shall we say, over a sustained period of time. So clearly there is an issue in how different communities are dealt with within the U.S. Justice system.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge issue with the justice system in the U.S. I mean, but also you have to think based off population and the access to guns. Like I would love to see how many people are in murder from gun violence versus knife violence versus vehicular homicide or strangling or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we would then be going into quite morbid territory with regards to these things. I recall, but unfortunately, that's the subject that we're in. I recall reading on Twitter a very interesting idea from one lady contributor. She said that why is it that guns don't have the same kind of treatment that all other products essentially in the US are treated? In that, if you're going to carry a gun in the USA, you should have insurance for it, and the insurance should be of a certain value to cover for certain kinds of eventualities. And her opinion was such that if people were forced to have insurance to be able to have the permit, like, for example, driving a car, this would also reduce the number of people who decided to carry because of the vast cost involved in having it.
Yeah, there's plenty of states that have carry. You need permits and blah blah blah, but people still access guns. Like, and the people who are committing the crimes are using illegal guns and not non-permitted guns.
Okay, so therefore, it's the question of insurance wouldn't necessarily make any difference for those kinds of crimes.
Especially when you have like 10,000, thousands and thousands of guns more than people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is an interesting statistic, isn't it? Because I think that, I mean, the USA
Like millions of guns running, floating around, and it's not hard to access them. So like the people who are committing the crimes, most of them probably aren't. The guns aren't legal. I mean, or they live in a state where you can have a gun. Doesn't matter if it's registered or not. I mean, like now in Georgia and Texas, I think as well, you can just carry a gun on you without a license, as long as you're not a convicted felon.
Okay,
They just passed this law. It just went into effect like last week or something. So
nice.
on the first, yeah. So you can, and definitely I know in Georgia you can carry it on you. It can't be. It has to be covered, I think. But you can carry it on you and not have to not have a training or any license or anything.
That's almost like, I mean, going back to, the status as it was in the Civil War, because in those days in the South, black people were not allowed to carry weapons. And nowadays, if you think that, because of the injustices of the system, uh, people of color are far more likely to be found guilty of a crime. And so therefore, what the numbers come down to is that black people are less likely to be allowed legally to carry weapons, even in areas where carrying a weapon doesn't require a permit.
Correct. And I would say like most of them are trying to protect. Like I don't know. It's like it's such a tough situation with the gun stuff. I mean, we're talking about people in prison, but like the gun talk can be a whole nother discussion, which we're not going to get an answer to because, like I said, there's more guns than people. If you want to, I think most people would want to stop more of the mass shootings, which are used like these assault rifles and bigger guns. Then I think that can be stopped, for sure, or they can put into legislation. But people getting, handguns and stuff, it's just, they're just not hard to find in the U.S. really.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's more than 300 million guns in circulation in the USA, and that is such a worrying statistic. I mean, when people talk about
you turn 18, you can go buy them at a Walmart. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Yeah, I remember seeing this on a wall in a supermarket when I first went to Florida back in 1989, and for me it was horrific. We'd go shopping, and you walk into a store, and on the one side they're selling clothing for kids, and on the other side they've got these huge weapons on the wall. Okay, fair enough, they're locked away, but it still leaves an impression. I mean, I can still remember it, and I was only 12 at the time.
Look at this stat. In the UK, there are 8,000 people in prison serving life sentences. It's twice. It's the same. It's more than France and Germany and Italy combined.
The USA, you mean?
No, UK.
Oh, okay, all right.
The UK has more people serving life sentences than France, Germany, Italy combined.
And it's only 8,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But the UK has a population of, I think it's 65 million. So if you say multiply that by 5 to have more or less the number of the same population that you've got in the USA, and the USA has then 203,000 people serving life sentences. So 8 times 5 is 40. So you still have only a quarter of the number on percentages of people serving life sentences in the UK. I think mainly because they don't have access to the kinds of weapons that will cause the kind of harm that is possible in the USA. If maybe the intent is there to kill someone, but if you don't actually succeed, then you are charged with attempted murder as opposed to murder, and so therefore the sentence is obviously a lot less. And that would probably be the main reason why there is such a difference in the numbers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Just the access to guns and how quick and easy it is to make that mistake. You know what I mean?
If you're crazy, if you're mad and you've got something next to you or by your side, then the chances are that this will be used.
Yeah.
You know, I can't see any circumstances under which I would attempt to kill somebody. But I'm sitting here now, very safe in my home, quite rational, quite calm, quite pleased to be speaking to my buddy. So therefore, I'm not really in that psychological situation where this may be a course of action that I could make a decision on. But if I'm really pissed off with something, and there's a gun sitting in my drawer, who knows what could happen? Yeah, I don't know. Guns are a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my cousin about it. They live in Georgia, and he was saying like, if you go out of your house one day and you got a pocket full of money, then you're probably gonna go spend it. If you go out of your house with a basketball, you're probably gonna go try to play basketball. You know what I mean? This what's in your pocket.
Mm.
If you go out with a bottle of booze, you're probably gonna go have some get drunk. You know what I mean? But if you go outside with a gun, what kind of mentality is that bringing into your mind that you have something that can take someone's life, that's very aggressive object, and I don't know if you ever held or shot a gun. Like, it's a crazy feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I've held a real gun. It was a 400-year-old dueling pistol, though, so therefore I don't think that counts.
I mean, when I was a kid, my dad, we would go down to my grandmother's, and she lived down in like the country, and I mean, my dad always had guns, and he would. I think I first shot a 9mm when I was like maybe 12 or something.
Mm.
And he was like, just shoot into the woods, boom, 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 boom. And he also told me, like, if someone's ever shooting at you with a 9mm, weave when you run, because they're very hard to aim with. Can you imagine someone telling a 12-year-old that?
Yeah, rather not, to be honest. But I mean, this is the thing I was going to say earlier.
Analogy of like and this is like, I mean, we're talking. Let's see, this is a long time, but this is like almost in the early 2000s.
Mm.
And this is just like when my dad passed away, I had to go clean out his house, and he had like 5 or 6 guns in his house, shotguns.
Yeah.
And
you guys
kind of grew up down on a farm and stuff, and it was just you just always had guns. You know what I mean? It was just something. And a lot of his patients were farmers, and they would sell these really fancy shotguns to him and stuff. So he would like collect them a bit.
Yeah. And your family are Democrats, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like what I'm saying is, so if we go back to this incarceration thing, it's amazing. So I guess like probably number one leader is access to the guns, but also you got to think about what's going on in society. That was it half of them or 2/3 of them are Black or African American?
Yeah.
So obviously it's coming down to like what's going on in their communities and the situation that they're put in. That they're I have to go back to like the strain theory that they're under this stress and issues with financially, or economically, socially, and they are trying to find other ways to get out. And then when you put yourself in those ways to make money, things happen that it's just not, and retaliation happens, and anger happens, and then people end up in jail. Like most, I guarantee a lot of them is probably like armed robbery. A lot of them. Because I watch a lot of crime shows, and a lot of people they go into they need money. Or one guy, he was on death row. This was a white guy, and he said that he had a family and everything, but he got in a drug addiction, and his family didn't really know, and he had to pay rent, but money was always gone because he was spending all it on drugs. But his wife and kids, no one knew. He was acting strange. They said, "Are you okay? Okay, blah blah blah." And he said, "Well, one day I went out and I said, I need to pay the rent." And I said, "How am I gonna?" And someone said, when I pay the rent, I use that ski mask or whatever, And the guy went out and he went to a place that he knew the guy working. And he was like, "I know this guy. I can just rob him. He won't say anything." And then he said he went in there and robbed him. He's like, when he realized that he had committed the crime and that the guy knew him, he's like, "This guy can identify me within an hour." or or tell somebody as soon as I leave. I was here. So he said I had to kill him. And he's like, I never thought about killing anybody. I never was in a situation where I was being shot at or a fight was breaking out. And he's like, I just was desperate to pay my rent for my family, and I ended up getting life, or he's on death row, like that. Or it was like, I need to pay the rent, and he said, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the problem there is the drug habit, and access to weapons to be able to carry out such an act. But I mean, when I think about countries that I would like to visit, now I have I'm afraid of flying now. I didn't used to be, but I am now. So therefore, it's much easier for me to make these plans. So there's no way I would fly out of Europe. But if I were to present myself with a list of countries to visit on the basis of, okay, having a good time, but also where would I feel safe taking my family, the USA would not figure high on that list. Because over the last few years, my kids wouldn't go to school in the USA on holiday, but I mean, okay, mass shootings in schools almost one a week. But on top of that, shopping centers, grocery stores, malls, cinemas, nightclubs. Is there any place which is not targeted in the USA by somebody who goes crazy and decides to start killing innocent people in the public? Anything can happen anywhere in the USA, and it's frightening because potentially everyone has a gun.
That's true, man. Because I mean, like I think I've told you this before. When I go back to the US, if I go to Atlanta, which probably averages like one shooting a day or more, I don't go out. And my family doesn't go out, and they go out because they're afraid to get shot. It's like you just don't go out anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy.
Happening everywhere, and like I was reading that Chicago had like last year had 722 murders. There's 2 murders a day or something.
Yeah, I mean it's
one city.
Yeah. No, of course. It's a friend of mine was telling me last week about one of the first times that he went to South Africa, and he was out and he was drunk and he decided to walk home, and a police cruiser stopped by and the policeman came out and said, "What are you doing, man?" And because they realized this guy's got to be a tourist, and he said, "Yeah, I'm walking home." And they said, get a cab. And the guy said, "Yeah, I don't want to get a cab." And so the police basically put him in the back and drove him home. And they said to him, if you ever go out again in public, after a certain time, you get a cab home or you stay where you are. Because otherwise you're not going to make it home. And these kinds of stories are quite horrifying.
Yeah, but I mean, I think also that's the risk of traveling is, being in an uncomfortable situation. I mean, I don't think risking death is part of it, but I mean, like, when you travel to other places, things aren't safe and uncertainty. But I think in the U.S., the odds of you being, I think you have a higher chance to be involved in a mass shooting than hit by lightning.
Yeah, which is something that obviously would figure quite highly in my planning. I wouldn't now want to go back to the US. I've been to the USA, I think, in all about 5 times. I'm not going to rush back. As beautiful a country as it is, it's kind of ruined by some of the people there. I'm sure we'll talk about prison populations again in the future, but we're already way beyond our hour mark. But so before we sort of close up for this sort of first episode in this little series of ours, Republicans can't seem to get it together, can they, with regards to electing a Speaker of the House?
No, they can't. And I think it's more, they're just not in the interest of the people. And a lot of politicians aren't, unfortunately. I'm not saying every politician isn't, but especially in like some of these the Republican Party, I just think like the interest of the people isn't there. And now it's like become a total joke that they couldn't be, select a speaker. They're bringing in pizzas, and they had children there, and they're yawning and sleeping, and it's just like, what is going on? Like, what really is going on? Like, what is your purpose is to serve the people, you know,
Mm.
and put these egos and everything out of the way, and get the government running. And people are struggling to make ends meet, and you guys are in here fighting because of political views, or just like children.
Yeah, I read one Twitter commenter say that for a lot of politicians nowadays, getting the job as a senator or a representative, it's no longer about representing the people, as you say, because the money that they get, that's just like a little bonus. What they're really there for is the kind of business interests which they can promote through their position in those political seats, and they get paid lots and lots of money by these business interests who tell them vote in this way. And that's essentially what it is. So when they become a representative of the people, what they're actually doing is taking on a very cushy line of business, which can be quite financially rewarding for them. And that's all they care about.
Yeah, it's very true. Like, it's just lobbying is everything. To get that's why you're never going to get these gun laws to change, because these people are put into office to support the NRA or whatever, National Rifle Association, and the sale of arms, because they make money off this. So that's why you'll never get these assault rifle and firearm laws in place because of this.
But I mean, that's because the people don't want to change it. I mean, if enough people wanted to change firearms laws, they would elect Democrats.
But how many people don't know what they represent? I mean, even Democrats are working on some things. They're not like the ones that aren't getting money either.
Yeah, of course, the arms trade is huge business for the USA, and so therefore, this is also why I've commented, repeatedly in the past. I don't support the Democrats, just because they are a little bit less, how shall I say, hateful of collective community politics than the Republicans. For me, they're both bad. And I think a two-party system is not the right way of running a democracy. I think that there's just simply not enough option for people to be able to make the choices that they would like to choose. On top of that, US politics is so restrictive. I was listening to some of the statements from the FTC recently with regards to the acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft, and that the FTC comes out and says, "Yeah, we are here to make sure that there are equal opportunities for people who want to get into the market, and so therefore we want to make sure that one company doesn't have a hugely dominant presence within a single sector." Okay, why don't we apply those principles to elections then? Can simply anybody turn up and expect to be elected into the House of Representatives? It's not possible. You need to have millions and millions of dollars in backing to be able to be elected, to simply run a campaign. Otherwise, nobody knows about you. So you've got, on the one hand, absolute protectionism with regards to the main elements of the American system. And on the other hand, this claim that, hey, look, we're here to basically keep everybody happy. Bullshit. Sorry to say it, Chris, but I mean,
but I wouldn't say. The Tories aren't doing so great either.
Good. Get rid of them. The campaign on Twitter is enough is enough. The Tories have stolen so much from the people. As my son playing Fortnite in the background. The people have stolen so much from the people, the Tories, that it's unbelievable that they continue to be re-elected. But I mean, I have to also say, yeah, I don't think Keir Starmer is the solution. He to me smacks of a Tony Blair style character, and for me, Tony Blair is a war criminal. So, you know, not the best person to try to follow.
I'm a fan of Tony Blair.
Huh? No, not a fan of Tony Blair. I get so put off. I actually get angry when Tony Blair says something that I sort of principally agree with. I just hate it. It gets on my nerves. Something chronic. I don't want to hear his opinion. He's a hateful person for me in British politics.
Yeah, I think I mean, sometimes I think that people or the younger generation coming up won't be so politically sided with like Democrats and Republicans, and maybe they'll start to see things for what they are or their own opinion. But it's just hard when you're just bred to pick a side as a kid, and also like in the U.S. it's like some people won't date Republicans. Or you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're a Democrat? Like, no, not gonna happen.
Yeah. I've
then you're just breeding, generations of this stuff. That's the hard part, because like if you won't even, you can't put aside your politics for love. It's just it's a hard battle. If love can't win with politics, then what can you do, Zach?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a problem with tolerance levels now in politics, especially clearly in the USA, but also in the UK. For example, Brexit has broken up many families. Lots of relatives no longer speak to one another on the basis of Brexit. And yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that people have to change that, because I can understand to a certain extent, but we need to try to go beyond that. We need to try to find a means of communicating with people, but it's not always possible. And so sometimes you've got to say, okay, I'm not going to do it. These people, it's not just one policy or another policy. It's their entire approach to humans, their entire approach to communities. I can't handle that. And this is where, for me, the Republicans fall short, because there is such a smell of white supremacy about so much of what the Republican Party stands for at the moment, that it's beyond distasteful. I don't like necessarily the Democratic Party to any great extent either. If you look at some of the corrupt members of their leadership in the past, but at the moment, wow, the Republicans are just pure toxicity for me.
Yeah, it's just, I totally agree with what you're saying. It feels like they just are anti anything, and now post-Trump era, hopefully stays like that. It just magnified the hate and the separation from it.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. All right, Bud. Thank you very much, man. This has gone on for a lot longer than we planned, so I'll get handy with the scissors on doing some editing. Yeah, thank you for your time, Chris. It's always good to chat with you, and I'll see you on Sunday at the game, man.
Cheers.
Take care, bud.
Yeah.
Two and a mic.